Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, a couple of months ago, for those of you who geek out on the channel, you know that we did a couple of videos where we talked about a very dangerous lawsuit that was being filed against 7 American gun manufacturers by the country of Mexico. It was a very dangerous lawsuit because if successful, it could really make all of these companies insolvent. Now, if you connect the dots here, you could probably come to a pretty logical conclusion that this current presidential administration was also behind it, but that's a side note. Well, the court that's handling this case in Massachusetts has made a massive ruling, and it has completely changed the complexion of this case, and for the better. So today, let's get you all educated and let's talk about great ruling in the gun industry's most dangerous lawsuit. Okay, before we get going too far down the road we're going down, proud to announce that this video is being brought to you by Right to Bear. That's right, legal protection for self-protection. Listen, good lawyers aren't cheap, cheap lawyers aren't good. You're not truly prepared unless you have Right to Bear back you. You will always get an attorney-answered hotline, so you will always have a confidential phone call. There are no cap limits for either civil or criminal defense. This covers all forms of self-defense. So from a fist to a firearm, from a fat lip to a dead body, you are covered, and you will have some of the nation's most passionate 2A attorneys in your corner fighting for you. And right now, if you visit my friends at protectwithbear.com and you use the promo code WGL, you will receive 10% off. Listen, you need to protect yourself so that you can protect them. Visit my good friends at protectwithbear.com. Okay, America, we've talked about this case twice before. We're going to talk about it again today. It is entitled Estados Unidos Mexicanos v. Smith & Wesson et al. It is filed in the United States District Court for the District of Massachusetts. We're not going to be talking about Smith & Wesson today, but we are going to be talking about all of the et als. Now, just to give you a little historical perspective so you understand what's going on here, the country of Mexico sued Smith & Wesson as well as 6 other firearms manufacturers. The other 6 are not based in Massachusetts, claiming that their production of firearms is what's causing Mexico's horrific gun violence problem. It has nothing to do with the Mexican drug cartels or anything like that. It's these evil American gun companies. Now, shortly after the suit was filed, all of the defendants moved to dismiss, saying that there had been no claim laid out in the complaint that it could actually serve as a cause of action. The trial court in Massachusetts actually agreed and dismissed this suit. That's when the First Circuit swooped in, took this on appeal, and reversed the court's decision, saying, no, they have, in fact, stated a cause of action. And that's what got the panic buttons pushing here, because if this suit is successful, guaranteed there will be many more that will sue until we run all of these gun manufacturing companies out of business. So 6 of the 7 defendants had actually filed a motion saying, hey, we're going to dismiss it because they lack personal jurisdiction over us. That court had never actually ruled on that because they had dismissed the suit on other grounds. Now that the First Circuit has revived it, the trial court has gone back and said, let's take a look at that motion. And oh, by the way, yeah, for 6 of you, you make a pretty good argument. So the bottom line is that every single defendant in this case has been relieved from this suit. The suit has been dismissed against 6 of the 7 named defendants. The only remaining defendant left in this case now is Smith & Wesson. Now, ultimately, the suits have been dismissed for a lack of personal jurisdiction, a new legal term that we haven't had a chance to geek out on, and we're going to get you educated on that. The technical definition of personal jurisdiction is: personal jurisdiction refers to a court's authority to adjudicate the rights and liability of the defendant. Before a court can exercise power over a party, the U.S. Constitution requires that the party has certain minimum contacts with the forum in which the court sits. Okay, but if 6 of the 7 companies don't even do business or are not incorporated in the state of Massachusetts, how then does the Massachusetts District Court have personal jurisdiction over them? That is the problem, and there's where the rub lies. The court, in outlining why they're going to dismiss this lawsuit against 6 of the defendants, stated, the core question for jurisdictional purposes is whether Mexico's claims against the 6 moving defendants arise from their business transactions in Massachusetts. As to those defendants, the connection of this matter to Massachusetts is gossamer thin at best. And this was the court's reasoning, and it's pretty sound. The government of Mexico is obviously not a citizen of Massachusetts. None of the 6 moving defendants is incorporated in Massachusetts, and none has a principal place of business in Massachusetts. There is no evidence that any of them have a manufacturing facility or even a sales office in Massachusetts. None of the alleged injuries occurred in Massachusetts. No Massachusetts citizen is alleged to have suffered any injury, and plaintiff has not identified any specific firearm or set of firearms that was sold in Massachusetts and caused injury in Mexico. And the court points out, listen, even if we want to be as liberal as we possibly can in the reading Mexico, you still haven't met your burden. Take this, for example. Furthermore, and despite the generous use of the word defendants throughout, the complaint does not actually allege the existence of a joint enterprise, joint venture, or civil conspiracy amongst the various defendants. There is no question, therefore, that personal jurisdiction must be proved separately as to each of the 6 moving defendants. And obviously, the court was not capable of making those findings. Now, I know many of you are still scratching your head saying, how could a lawsuit in Mexico against 7 firearms manufacturers have anything to do with Mexican drug cartel violence? It's an excellent question. I don't really have the answer either. The court tried to explain the plaintiff's theory this way. At its core, plaintiff's jurisdictional theory is based on statistical probabilities. Its reasoning may be characterized as follows. 1, each of the 6 moving defendants sold firearms to distributors and retailers in each of the 50 states. 2, each of the 6 defendants sold some undetermined number of firearms to Massachusetts-based distributors or retailers. 3, some undetermined number of the firearms that were sold by each of the 6 defendants nationwide were illegally trafficked to Mexico. 4, some undetermined number of the firearms that were trafficked to Mexico caused injury there, and therefore 5, at least some of the firearms sold by each of the 6 defendants to Massachusetts entities must have caused injuries in Mexico. And you sit there and you go, well, who came up with that lame brain theory, and what evidence could they have possibly used to try to extrapolate that connection? Well, the answer is an old political hack that gun grabbers use in a lot of cases. Of course, that's Miss Lucy P. Allen. But the court was not particularly persuaded. She then tried to use the data to estimate the number of firearms that she believes were likely trafficked into Mexico after a Massachusetts sale over the last 10 years. As explained below, however, that report is problematic in multiple respects, beginning with the fact that Congress has prohibited the use of the ATF data in any civil action, and thus a critical foundation of her opinion must be disregarded. Yeah, that's right. They were using data that was actually protected by the Firearm Owners Protection Act of 1986, but hey, there is no gun registry, right? The court went on to further criticize her opinion this way. Furthermore, her opinion stopped short of estimating the number of firearms manufactured by each defendant that actually caused an injury in Mexico, a critical link to connect defendant's business in Massachusetts to plaintiff's claims. Under the circumstances, her opinion is not sufficient to prove the necessary jurisdictional nexus. Now, for those of you geeking out in Massachusetts, you may realize that you have what's called a long arm statute. A long arm statute is an ability for the state of Massachusetts to reach out and sue companies that are even doing some business in Massachusetts. It's primarily used for product liability. And yes, the country of Mexico tried to use Massachusetts' very liberal long arm statute to hook all of the defendants on this lawsuit. It was unsuccessful for the following reason. The Massachusetts long arm statute authorizes personal jurisdiction in 8 specified circumstances. As relevant here, the statute provides that the court may exercise personal jurisdiction over a person who acts directly or by an agent as the cause of action in any law or equity arising from the persons transacting any business in this Commonwealth. For jurisdiction to exist under Section 3A, the complaint must allege sufficient facts to satisfy 2 elements. 1, the defendant must have transacted business in Massachusetts, and the defendants are not disputing that at all, but then they must also establish, and 2, the plaintiff's claim must have arisen from the transactions of business by the defendant. But what the gun manufacturers and the court both point out here is, defendants do not appear to dispute that they transact business in Massachusetts by selling guns to distributors and retailers here. Plaintiffs have therefore met its burden to show that defendants have transacted business in Massachusetts for the purpose of 3A. The critical question, therefore, becomes whether plaintiff's claim against each out-of-state defendant arise from its transactions within the Commonwealth. And we know the answer to be no to that because the court has ultimately ruled In short, plaintiff has been unable to muster sufficient proof to establish a sufficient relationship between the claimed injuries and the business transactions of any of the 6 defendants in Massachusetts. Nor does the court have the authority to relax the requirements of personal jurisdiction, even in cases involving claims against unpopular or controversial parties. Not sure what makes them unpopular or controversial, but that's the words the court chose. They also stated, whether plaintiff might be able to establish personal jurisdiction over any of the 6 defendants in a state where it actually is located or that otherwise has some reasonable connection to the pleaded claims is not a question before this court. For now, it is enough to say that plaintiff cannot do so here. Accordingly, and for the following reasons, defendant's motion to dismiss will be granted. Okay, so what does this ruling mean? What are the remedies? Okay, I mentioned there were 7 named defendants. That's why it's called Smith and Wesson et al. The other 6 have all had their cases dismissed. The order of the court states as follows. For the foregoing reasons, the motions of defendants Barrett Firearms Manufacturing, Inc., Beretta USA Corp., Century International Arms, Inc., Colts Manufacturing Company, LLC, Glock, Inc., and Sturm, Ruger and Company, Inc., to dismiss for lack of personal jurisdiction pursuant to Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 12b-2 are granted. Which means that there is only one named defendant left in the case. That is Smith & Wesson, because they are a Massachusetts incorporated company. I'm not saying that Mexico has a good suit against Smith & Wesson. They're going to still have to prove a causal connection between their manufacturing and the injuries sustained in Mexico. But as to the other 6 defendants, this case is now done with. Now, can we see Mexico perhaps file suit against them in other states? Yeah, there is a high probability of that. But for the time being, this is a huge, huge victory for the gun manufacturing industry. Okay, the case once again is called Estados Unidos Mexicanos v. Smith & Wesson et al. But the et als are all gone now, so it's really just versus Smith & Wesson. We'll go ahead and link up the order of the court down below so that you can geek out on it for yourself. Maybe you got some questions about this or something else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights. If you guys do, you should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now. But if you don't, that's okay. That information is down there in the description box. Maybe you got an idea for a video we should be doing here. If you do, go ahead and click on that link right there. Or maybe you just want to be part of our monthly newsletter. The information on how to subscribe to that is down below in the description box. And then finally, and most importantly, America, let's everyone remember that part of being a lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation, how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching and stay safe.